kick off our Heat 1 of the senior gilts with the 11 entry gilt. Here's a gilt that's got a lot of rib in center body. She's very soft and maternal in her center. I'd like to give this gilt more extension, especially ahead of her blade. I'd like to give her more elevation at the point of her shoulder, and I'd just like to stouten her up in her basic structure. As we move into the 12 entry gilt, this gilt's going to be third in this particular heat. I love the pattern and design of this gilt. She's a very level design gilt that has a lot of extension ahead of her blade. I would like to correct her in the angle to her skeleton. She's too upright in her blade and straight in her knee for me. She wants to get straighter in her hock and out through her pastern. I think if we could relax her there, she'd take a longer stride. Relative to some others, I'd like to bulk her up through her center. The 13 gilt is going to be second in this particular drive. I think this gilt has a tremendous amount of shape when you study her blade back. She's bold through her rib and soft and maternal through her center body. She doesn't have the pattern and extension in the third as our third place gilt does, and I could change her there, but I still think a gilt that comes with a lot of breeding value. The 14 entry gilt. Here's another gilt that just reads very, very maternal through her center. I'd like to fix this gilt's overall structure composition. I think she needs to be elevated up front, stoutened up in her bone work, and relaxed in through her pastern so she can take a longer stride. I'd also like to clean her up in terms of her condition. The 15 entry gilt's going to be our class winner in this heat. I think this gilt brings a lot of positive attributes to the table. Very, very attractive when you view her on the profile. I like how stout and powerful she is through her bone work. She's correct in the angles to her skeleton and takes a long, agile stride. I think there's a lot of basics and pieces here that you can take and breed to boars to accentuate not only look and design, but also muscularity into her offspring. The 16 entry gilt, another one that we can appreciate for just a really bold, productive, and pliable type of center. One that I just want to elevate in terms of her front structure and give her more extension through her pattern. A really nice class, and congratulations to all of these exhibitors. As we work into Heat 2 of our senior gilt class, the 17 entry will be the first one we lead out with. I think a gilt that's really bold and maternal through her center body, and you really have to appreciate that about her. Compared to some other gilts in this class, I'd like to change her in terms of her pattern, elevate her at the point of her shoulder and make her more level designed, but I think that her maternal center really reads with a lot of value. The 18 entry gilt is going to be second in this particular class, a really stout skulled gilt that has a tremendous amount of power as you study her out of the backside of her blade. I like how bold she is through her rib and center body. To compete with our class winner, I just have to clean her up in terms of her composition and make her more powerful going away. The 19 entry gilt is going to be third in our class. This is a gilt that I think is so attractive in her overall design. She's tall at her shoulder and really extended there back. In order for her to compete, she just has to have more power and true muscle shape in order to create offspring that are going to be really productive from a market animal standpoint. The 20 entry gilt, another one that's really soft in her center body. She comes apart for me in terms of her skeleton. She's too low at the point of her shoulder and forward in her blade. She's wrong in the angle to her hock and pastern and really wants to tuck that underneath her as she goes. Really just need to fix this one in terms of structural integrity to get any higher in this particular class today. The 21 entry gilt, a lot of similarities to the 20 entry gilt. Another one that's low at the point of her shoulder and wants to rock too far forward in there, needs more structural integrity to her hock and pastern, and yet she does come with quite a bit of mass and power as you study her at the top side of her skeleton. I'd like to clean her up in terms of her composition. The 22 entry gilt is going to be our class winner in this particular class. Really like the pattern of this gilt, the design of her blade. I appreciate the agility she has through her hip and her pastern. She can really get out there and stride. I think that she's a good combination of muscle and finish, as well with a really good pattern and look and a structural integrity design. We kick off our Heat 3 drive with the 23 entry gilt, and she'll be your third place in this class. I think a gilt that does a lot of the things well that we talked about in this previous heat. She's got a big top, bold rib, and a soft maternal center. I could make her wider as she drives at me through her chest, and I'd like to elevate her up through her blade and rock her back and her shoulder, but I really appreciate the power and mass that she brings to the table. The 24 entry Gilt is going to be our winner in this particular class. Yes, she could be stouter and more opened up through her chest and blade, but I think a Gilt that is really attractive in terms of her profile, very level designed and square in her hip. She's a great combination of composition, muscle, and structure. I too could make her a touch taller up front, but I think that's being picky on a Gilt that's very nice. Our second place Gilt is the 25 entry Gilt. I really like this Gilt's design as well. I think that she is a great combination between 1 and 3 in this class. Good designed Gilt that's probably bigger in her blade even than our class winner. She comes square out of the back side of her blade into her top and has a really good productive and pliable rib shape. I like how square she is through her hip. The 26 entry Gilt is one that's just carrying more cover and condition. I'd like to clean her up from that standpoint. She's free and loose in her skeleton, however, and I think you can appreciate her for that. I think if she was more elevated at the point of her shoulder and squarer through her hip, cleaner in her composition, she would definitely be competitive with our top 3 in this particular class. The 27 entry Gilt is one that's maybe just a little further behind in terms of growth and performance. I'd like to see more from her there. She's also just a narrower and frailer constructed Gilt, coming and going. I especially want to change her when I get in behind her, make her squarer through her pin set and squarer in her hock. Just power her up when you study her from behind. Heat 4 kicks off immediately with our class winner in this particular heat. I think a very productive and maternal type of Gilt. Again, one that just runs downhill up front for me. I just need to elevate her there. But I think she's very smooth in her composition, a big maternal center type of Gilt that's working out of a pretty stout hip, and I think you can appreciate her for that. The 29 entry Gilt is our second place in this class, a Gilt that's very attractive, extended in ahead of her blade. She just doesn't come with as much power as our class winner. I'd like to see her especially powered up through her hip and stifling when I get in behind her. Just give her that more attractive look on the profile that we find with our class winner, but still one that I think is very functional and agile and correct in her skeleton. The 30 lot Gilt is very similar, obviously in color pattern to our second place Gilt, but I think when you study her in terms of skeleton, this Gilt's just so much narrower in her chest and frailer in her feature. I really just need to open her up at the base of her skeleton, which would just correlate to the rest of her body and make her more powerful, give her more center body volume. The 31 Gilt is our third place in this class. Tons of power and mass working in this Gilt. She's a really big topped Gilt, bold in her blade and her rib and center body. I just don't know that she comes with those extras of look and pattern and design that we find in 1 and 2 in this particular heat, but I appreciate the stoutness that she does offer to the equation. In our champion senior Gilt drive, our champion's going to be our 22 entry Gilt, one that I think just really excels in terms of look and pattern. She's different in her skeleton than a lot of the Gilts that we've seen. She pushes her hock further back behind her. She gets out and reaches with more flex and ease, has more height at the point of her shoulder, and I think that she just reads to be very, very unique in terms of the different Gilts that we've observed. The reserve Gilt in the senior division is going to be the 24 entry Gilt. Another Gilt that I think is just really, really attractive in terms of her look and pattern. She's not as powerful as our champion in this division, not as opened up in her chest or is opened up going away, but still one that I think is very level designed, and she gets out and she moves with flex and ease. Power her up, and I think that she pushes our champion just a touch harder. Our third overall Gilt in the senior division is the 15 Gilt. The 15 Gilt is one that really hit me hard when I saw this first heat of Gilt. She's very unique in terms of her basic build and design, and I appreciate her color as well. She's probably not as extended as the champion and reserves in this division, and I don't know that she flexes her hock just as well as those two ahead of her. If I can fix her in those areas, I think she still is a very competitive Gilt. Congratulations to each of these exhibitors.